Some silences are quiet, the comfortable silence between two old friends, or the peaceful silence of a library. But the silence I lived with for 25 years, that was a different kind. It was a screaming silence, a roaring, deafening void where a son's voice should have been. For a quarter of a century, my son David acted as if I was dead. He didn't call on my birthday. He didn't call when his mother passed. Nothing. Then one Tuesday afternoon, the impossible happened. I became a multi-millionaire overnight. And you wouldn't believe what arrived in the mail 2 weeks later. A gold-embossed Christmas card, an invitation to his home. He wanted his old dad back, or so he said. But I knew what he really wanted, and I decided right then and there that this Christmas, Santa wasn't the only one coming to town. I was coming too, and I was bringing a reckoning with me. My name is Arthur Jensen. I'm 76 years old, and for most of the last 2.5 decades, my world has been the size of my small 2-bedroom house in suburban Ohio. The loudest sound was usually the hum of the refrigerator or the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a clock my late wife Sarah bought at a flea market the year we were married. Every tick was a second I wasn't speaking to my only child. The house is filled with ghosts, not the spooky kind, but the ghosts of memory. In the kitchen, I can still see Sarah, her hands dusted with flour, humming a tune that was always slightly off-key. In the backyard by the old oak tree, I can see a 7-year-old David, his face smeared with dirt, proudly showing me a frog he'd caught. These memories were once a comfort. After David left, they became daggers. You see, I wasn't a perfect man. I know that. I was a mechanic, a man who understood engines better than emotions. I worked with my hands, provided a steady income, and kept a roof over our heads. But I was distant. I came home tired, smelling of grease and gasoline, and often retreated to the garage, my sanctuary. I thought providing was the same as loving. It's a mistake many men of my generation made. But that wasn't the mistake that cost me my son. The real sin, the one that shattered our family, happened when David was 18. I was 45, feeling old and unseen. A younger woman at the parts supplier started paying attention to me. Flattery is a potent poison for a man feeling invisible. It led to an affair, a cheap, sordid affair that I ended after 6 months, crippled with guilt. But the damage was done. Someone saw us. Someone told Sarah. I will never forget the look on her face. It wasn't anger or rage. It was disintegration, like a beautiful porcelain vase cracking in slow motion. The discovery broke her spirit. David, on the cusp of manhood and fiercely protective of his mother, saw it all. He saw her crying herself to sleep. He saw her lose weight, the light in her eyes dimming until it was just a pilot light. He confronted me in the garage. My own space turned against me. He didn't shout like a boy. He spoke with the cold, hard finality of a judge passing a life sentence. "You killed her," he said, his voice trembling with a terrifying calm. "You just haven't buried her yet. As far as I'm concerned, I don't have a father anymore." He packed his bags for college a week later and never looked back. He was true to his word. Sarah and I stayed together, but we were just two roommates haunted by the same ghost. My betrayal had planted a cancer in her soul, one that the doctors couldn't find on any x-ray. She passed away from pneumonia 8 years later, but David was right. Her death certificate should have listed a broken heart as the cause. I called David to tell him his mother was gone. He listened, said, "I know," and hung up. He attended the funeral, standing on the opposite side of the grave with his new wife, Jessica, a woman I'd never met. He never once looked at me, and so began the silence. 25 years, 9,125 days. Each one marked by the ticking of that grandfather clock, counting the seconds of my exile. I sent birthday cards that were never acknowledged, Christmas gifts that were likely thrown away. I followed his life through the grapevine, a promotion at the bank, the birth of my grandson, Leo. A grandson I'd only seen in a blurry picture on a mutual acquaintance's social media. I was a ghost in my own family's history, and I had accepted that this was my penance. This quiet, lonely life was the price for my greatest failure. I deserved it. The change didn't come with a bang, but with a registered letter. It was from a corporate law firm in California, A name I didn't recognize printed on thick, cream-colored paper that felt alien in my calloused hands. I almost threw it out, thinking it was a scam. You see, back in the late 90s in my garage, I had tinkered. I was always trying to build a better mousetrap, or in my case, a more efficient fuel injector. I developed a unique valve design, something I thought was clever. I spent a couple of $1,000s, a fortune for me back then, to get it patented. I sent proposals to Ford, GM, Chrysler. They all sent back polite rejection letters. So the patent paperwork went into a dusty file cabinet, another forgotten dream. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who forgot. I'd licensed the patent for a pittance to a small tech startup in Silicon Valley, a company run by a couple of kids who just wanted to use the core concept for something related to airflow management in computer servers. The deal was a few $100 a year and 0.5% of any future sale of the company. I took it, thinking I'd be lucky to get a free lunch out of it. For 20 years, the checks for $250 came like clockwork, a sad little reminder of what could have been until now. The letter informed me that the small startup, Aerotech Dynamics, had just been acquired by a global tech behemoth for the staggering sum of $4.2 billion. My forgotten patent was a critical piece of their cooling technology, which was now set to revolutionize data centers worldwide. My 0.5% share, I read the numbers several times, my old eyes struggling to process the zeros. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. After legal fees and taxes, my share would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $21 million. $21 million. The first person I wanted to call was Sarah, to tell her we could have finally taken that trip to Italy she always dreamed of, but she was gone. The second person I thought of was David, my son. A part of me, a foolish, hopeful part, thought, this will fix it. This will show him I'm not a complete failure. The local paper got wind of the story. Local mechanic becomes tech millionaire overnight. It was a classic rags to riches tale. They took a picture of me standing awkwardly in front of my garage, the very place where my life had both been built and torn apart. 2 weeks after that article ran, the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Hello, I answered, my voice raspy. A pause. Then a voice I hadn't heard in a quarter of a century, deeper now, but unmistakably his. Dad, it's David. The world stopped. The grandfather clock seemed to hold its breath. I gripped the receiver, my knuckles turning white. I couldn't speak. Dad, are you there? He asked, a strange, artificial warmth in his tone. Look, I know it's been a long time. Too long. I was wrong to let it go on this long. Life gets busy, you know? Busy. The word was a slap in the face. He wasn't busy for 25 years. He was erasing me. I saw the article in the paper, he continued a little too quickly. Incredible. Just incredible. Good for you. Really. There it was. The reason for the call. Not regret, not love. An article in a newspaper. He stumbled through more pleasantries asking about my health, the house. It was like listening to a stranger read a script. Then came the purpose of the call, wrapped in a pretty bow. Listen, the reason I'm calling is, well, it's Christmas soon. Jessica and I and your grandson, Leo, we'd love for you to come and spend it with us. It's time to put the past behind us. It's time for you to meet your grandson. He dangled Leo like a prize, the one thing he knew I ached for. The past wasn't something to be put behind us like an old coat. It was a mountain range separating us, and he was pretending it was just a crack in the sidewalk. Every instinct screamed at me to hang up, to tell him where he could shove his hollow invitation, but a different thought, a cold, hard, and patient thought, began to form in my mind. He had judged me and sentenced me to a lifetime of solitude. He had built a wall and left me to die on the other side. Now, because of a pile of money, he was offering to open a door in that wall. Fine, I would walk through it, but I wouldn't be coming as a forgiven father. I'd be coming as his judge. David, I said, my voice steady and calm, I'd love to. Hope is a stubborn weed. Despite the cold calculation forming in my heart, a part of me hoped I was wrong. Maybe the money was just the catalyst, the excuse he needed to break the silence he didn't know how to break himself. Maybe seeing me as a success instead of the grease-stained failure he remembered would finally allow him to see me as a man again. That foolish hope lasted for about 72 hours. It died in a sterile, glass-walled office downtown. I knew I was out of my depth. A man who spent his life negotiating the price of a rebuilt transmission was not equipped to handle millions of dollars, or a son who suddenly materialized from the ether. So I did something I should have done years ago. I asked for help. I hired a man named Richard Peterson, a private investigator. He was a retired police detective, a man with tired eyes that missed nothing. "So, Mr. Jensen," he said, leaning back in his leather chair, "you want me to look into your son?" He didn't ask why. Good investigators rarely ask why until they have the what. "I want to know everything," I told him. "His finances, his marriage, his business. Everything." He called me for the first time in 25 years, 2 weeks after my name was in the paper next to the word millionaire. "I want to know what I'm walking into." Peterson just nodded, writing in a small notepad. "I'll be discreet." While he worked, I began my own education. I met with financial advisors and lawyers. They talked about portfolios, trusts, and tax shelters. The words swam around my head, foreign and intimidating. But one concept stuck out: the revocable living trust, a legal entity you could create, put your assets into, and control completely until you died. You could name beneficiaries, and you could change them with the stroke of a pen. The idea took root in my mind. It was a tool. Power. And I was beginning to understand that money wasn't just for buying things. It was a language, and it was the only one my son seemed to be speaking. A week later, Peterson called me back to his office. He had a thick manila folder on his desk. He didn't waste time with small talk. "Your son, David Jensen," he began, opening the folder. "He's in trouble. Deep trouble." The picture he painted was grim. David had left his stable job at the bank years ago to start his own real estate development company. He'd had some early success during the housing boom, which is when he and Jessica bought their big house in the exclusive Northwood Hills suburb, enrolled Leo in a private academy, and started living a life that looked perfect on the outside. But David had overleveraged. He took on a massive commercial development project, a luxury condo complex called the Willow Creek Estates. He'd sunk every penny he had, and a lot he didn't, into it. Then the market turned. Permits were delayed, construction costs skyrocketed, and two of his primary investors pulled out. "He's drowning, Arthur," Peterson said, sliding a document across the desk. It was a list of liens and notices of default. "He's taken out secondary loans with predatory interest rates. He owes his contractors nearly $1 million. He's been shuffling money between accounts to stay afloat. But the whole house of cards is about to come down. The bank is set to foreclose on the project land in late January. If that happens, he's not just broke. He's ruined. He'll face lawsuits, possibly even charges of fraud for misrepresenting his assets to his lenders." He then showed me another set of papers, credit card statements. David and Jessica were living far beyond their means. The expensive cars were leased. The country club membership was in arrears. The perfect life was a facade, propped up by debt and desperation. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just a son looking for a handout. This was a cornered animal. My money wasn't a bonus to him. It was a lifeline. It was the only thing that could save him from total collapse and public humiliation. The last paper Peterson showed me was the one that sealed it. It was a printout of an email, obtained through methods I didn't ask about. It was from David to his wife, Jessica, dated the day after he called me. The subject line was, "It's working." The email read, "Jess, I spoke to him. He took the bait. He's coming for Christmas. Be nice. Be the perfect daughter-in-law. We just need to play our cards right for a few weeks. Talk up Leo, make him feel like he's part of the family he's been missing. I'll feel him out about an investment in the company to get us through the winter. Once the money's in, we can deal with him later. We're going to get through this. Deal with him later." The words echoed in the silent office. The last embers of my foolish hope were extinguished, leaving nothing but cold, hard ash. He wasn't just greedy. He was predatory. He was using his own son, my grandson, as bait. He and his wife were actors in a play, and I was the wealthy fool they were hoping to swindle. I sat there for a long time after Peterson left, the folder lying on the table in front of me like a venomous snake. The grief for the son I had lost 25 years ago was replaced by a cold, clear purpose. He had thought me old, sentimental, and stupid, a guilty father ripe for the picking. He was about to find out how wrong he was. The plan began to form, not out of rage, but out of a profound and terrible clarity. He wanted a performance? I'd give him the performance of a lifetime. He wanted to talk about money and investments? We would talk. He wanted me to be the forgiving father, the benevolent patriarch with his checkbook open. I would play the part perfectly. Christmas was coming, and I was going to give my son exactly what he deserved. The drive to David's house on Christmas Eve felt like crossing into enemy territory. I had rented a car, a modest but new sedan, the kind of car a sensible, newly rich old man might buy. It was all part of the costume. My old pickup truck, with its familiar scent of oil and rust, didn't fit the role I was about to play. I pulled into the curved driveway of a house that was more of a statement than a home. It was a 2-story brick colonial with white pillars, perfectly manicured lawns even under a light dusting of snow, and an oversized wreath with a giant red bow on the door. It was a house designed to scream, "We've made it." Knowing what I knew, it screamed, "We're faking it." As I stepped out of the car, the front door flew open. David stood there, a practiced, brilliant smile plastered on his face. He was heavier than I remembered, his hair thinning, but he wore an expensive cashmere sweater like a suit of armor. "Dad, you made it! Merry Christmas!" he boomed, striding towards me and wrapping me in an awkward, stiff hug. It was the first time he had touched me in 25 years. It felt like being embraced by a stranger. "Hello, David," I said, keeping my voice even. "It's good to see you." A woman appeared behind him, his wife Jessica. She was blonde, thin, and her smile was just as bright and just as fake. "Arthur, it is so wonderful to finally meet you. We've heard so much about you." A blatant lie, delivered with the breezy confidence of a seasoned socialite. "Please, come in," she said, ushering me inside. The interior was just as impeccable and soulless as the exterior. A giant Christmas tree stood in the 2-story foyer, professionally decorated with coordinated silver and gold ornaments. Everything was cream and beige and looked like it had been lifted from a magazine. There was no clutter, no personality, no sign of life. Then I saw him. A boy was standing hesitantly at the top of the grand staircase. He had David's dark hair but a softer face, a face that reminded me so much of Sarah. He looked to be about 15. This was Leo, my grandson. "Leo, come down and say hello to your grandfather," Jessica called up, her voice a little too sharp. He came down the stairs slowly, his eyes fixed on me with a mixture of curiosity and teenage awkwardness. He was clutching a book. I stepped forward, my carefully constructed emotional walls threatening to crack. This boy was real. He was the innocent in all of this. "Hello, Leo," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "I'm your grandpa, Arthur." "Hi," he mumbled, not quite meeting my eye. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you," I said, and I meant it. It was the only true thing I had said since I arrived. I pointed to his book. "What are you reading?" He seemed surprised by the question. "It's a book on astrophysics, a brief history of time." "Stephen Hawking," I smiled. "A brilliant mind." I always found quantum mechanics fascinating. The idea that a particle can be in 2 places at once feels a bit like family, doesn't it? For the first time, he looked directly at me, a flicker of genuine interest in his eyes. David and Jessica exchanged a quick, pleased glance. Phase 1, successful, their eyes seemed to say. The old man is connecting with the kid. The evening was a master class in theatrical fraud. Jessica served a beautiful meal I barely tasted. David kept my wine glass full and steered the conversation with practiced ease. He asked about my old life, but not really. He asked questions designed to get me to talk about my new life. "So, Dad, it must be quite a change," he said, swirling his wine. "From fixing carburetors to managing a portfolio. Have you got good people helping you?" "Oh, yes," I said, taking the bait. "A whole team, lawyers, accountants. They're setting up a family trust. The Jensen Legacy Trust, they're calling it. A way to make sure the family is taken care of for generations to come." I saw a flicker in his eyes. Not of greed, but of ravenous, desperate hunger. Jessica placed her hand on his arm, a silent signal. That's wonderful, Dad, David said, his voice thick with false emotion. Thinking of the future, of family. They asked me to stay in the guest room, a room as sterile as a hotel. Before bed, David caught me in the hallway. Dad, he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially, I'm so glad you're here. Look, I don't want to mix business with family, especially not now, but my company is on the verge of something huge, a major expansion. But with the economy the way it is, bridge financing is tight. I was putting together a proposal for investors, and I thought, who better to bring in on the ground floor than family? He was so smooth, so rehearsed. I feigned thoughtful consideration. A business proposal, you say? Well, my advisors are always telling me to diversify. Real estate could be a smart move. Why don't you tell me about it tomorrow? Let's not spoil this evening. Let's just enjoy being a family. I clapped him on the shoulder, a gesture of paternal affection that made my skin crawl. Tomorrow, I repeated. His smile was one of pure, unadulterated relief. He thought he had me. He thought the fish was on the hook. That night, I lay awake in the silent, unfamiliar room. I heard the faint murmur of their voices from their bedroom down the hall. They were probably congratulating each other, planning how they would spend my money, how they would deal with me later. They had no idea that I was the fisherman, and he was the one who had swum right into the net. Tomorrow was Christmas Day, Judgment Day, and I was ready. Christmas morning dawned bright and cold. The snow on the lawn sparkled under a clear winter sky. Downstairs, the scene was one of manufactured domestic bliss. Christmas music played softly from hidden speakers. A fire crackled in the hearth. David was wearing a garish Christmas sweater, Jessica a festive red apron over her silk pajamas. They were playing their parts to perfection. Leo was the only one who seemed immune to the charade. He sat slightly apart from the tree, already engrossed in a new book he'd unwrapped, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Presents were exchanged. Jessica and David gave me a ridiculously expensive watch. A man of your stature needs a proper timepiece, David had said with a knowing wink. The weight of it on my wrist felt like a manacle. I gave them a generic, expensive-looking crystal vase I'd had my lawyer's assistant pick out. It was meaningless, which made it the perfect gift. For Leo, I had chosen carefully. I gave him a high-powered telescope. Not just any telescope, but a sophisticated model with a computerized mount for tracking celestial objects. When he unwrapped it, his jaw dropped. Whoa, he breathed, his eyes wide with genuine delight. For the first time, the moody teenage facade vanished, replaced by the pure joy of a child. This is a Schmidt Cassegrain with a go-to mount. How did you know? A good mechanic knows his tool, I said with a smile, and a good scientist needs his. I figured you might want to see those quantum particles for yourself. He looked at me, a real, unguarded smile spreading across his face. Thank you, Grandpa. David clapped his hands together. Fantastic. See, Dad? You fit right in. The subtext was clear. You're buying your way into our family, and it's working. After the gift opening charade, David cornered me in the study, a room lined with leather-bound books that looked like they had never been opened. He had a glossy, professionally printed prospectus in his hand. The Willow Creek Estates. He launched into his pitch, a torrent of buzzwords and projections. Market-leading amenities, unprecedented ROI, prime location. He spoke with the frantic energy of a man gambling his last chip. He showed me architectural renderings of a gleaming glass and steel building, a paradise for the wealthy. The problem is a short-term cash flow issue, he said, trying to sound casual. A capital injection of, say, $2 million would solve everything. It would secure the financing, pay the contractors, and get us across the finish line. For that, I could offer you a 20% equity stake in the entire project. Based on our projections, your initial investment would be worth $10 million within 5 years. He was offering me a piece of a sinking ship, trying to sell me the waterlogged deck chairs for a fortune. I listened patiently, nodding in all the right places. I picked up the prospectus and flipped through the pages, pretending to study the financials. The very same documents Richard Peterson had shown me, only David's version had conveniently omitted all the debt and liens. "It looks impressive, son," I said, my voice full of paternal pride. "You've really built something." Relief washed over his face. "So, you'll consider it?" "Consider it?" I said, putting the prospectus down on his mahogany desk. "David, I'm not going to consider it. I'm going to do it." His eyes widened. He looked like he was going to cry. "Dad, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. My touch was a lie, but a necessary one. "We're family. Family helps family. Of course I'll help you. Let the lawyers handle the details after the holiday. Today is about us." He actually hugged me then, a real, desperate hug. He was clinging to me like a drowning man to a raft. "Thank you, Dad. You won't regret this. This is a new beginning for us." "Oh, it's a beginning, all right," I thought to myself. "But it's the beginning of the end." We walked out of the study, David looking 10 years younger, his face flushed with victory. Jessica saw his expression, and her own tense smile relaxed into one of genuine triumph. They thought they had won. They thought the old man had fallen for it all. The smiles, the grandson, the sob story. The rest of the day passed in a blur of forced festivity. Jessica was now overly attentive, calling me Dad in a way that set my teeth on edge. David was practically floating, talking animatedly about his plans for the future. Plans built on a foundation of my money and his deceit. They were so close to their prize. They could taste it. And that made what was coming next all the more satisfying. The Christmas dinner was a few hours away. The table was set. The turkey was in the oven. My final gift, the only one that mattered, was wrapped and waiting in my bag upstairs. The performance was nearly over. It was almost time for the curtain to fall. The dining room was set for a feast. A long, polished table reflected the light of a crystal chandelier. The best china, the best silver. A bottle of what David proudly announced was a $300 bottle of Bordeaux sat breathing on a side table. It was the perfect stage for the final act. Jessica had outdone herself. The turkey was golden brown, surrounded by a dozen side dishes. It was a picture of abundance, a desperate attempt to project a prosperity they didn't possess. We took our seats. David at the head of the table, me at the other end, the seat of the honored guest. Jessica sat to his right, Leo to his left. Leo seemed withdrawn again, lost in his own world, occasionally glancing at me with a look I couldn't quite decipher. David poured the expensive wine. He raised his glass. "A toast," he announced, his voice ringing with confidence. "To family, to new beginnings, and to my dad, Arthur. For coming home." Jessica beamed at me. "To Arthur." I raised my glass. "To family," I said, my eyes meeting David's over the rim of my glass. I took a sip. The wine tasted like ash. The dinner conversation was all David. He talked about the future of Willow Creek Estates now that its financing was secure. He talked about a summer trip to Europe they could finally take. He was spending the money before it was even in his account. He was so caught up in his victory lap that he didn't notice the growing silence from his son or the storm gathering in my eyes. Finally, after the main course was cleared and Jessica brought out a decadent-looking dessert, I knew it was time. "Before we have dessert," I said, my voice cutting through David's chatter, "I have one more gift. It's not much, but I wanted to give it to you here, with the family." David and Jessica exchanged excited, knowing glances. This was it, the check, the signed papers. I reached into the gift bag I'd placed by my chair and pulled out a large, beautifully wrapped box, tied with a gold ribbon. I slid it down the long table until it stopped in front of David. "For you, son," I said. His hands trembled slightly as he undid the ribbon. He tore off the paper with the eagerness of a child. But when he lifted the lid of the box, his triumphant smile froze and slowly dissolved into a mask of utter confusion. The box was not filled with stock certificates or legal documents for him to sign. It was filled with paper, stacks of it. On the very top was a thick, bound report. The cover read, "Confidential Financial Investigation, David Jensen and Associates, LLC, prepared by Richard Peterson, P.I." Beneath it was a copy of every lien against his property, every notice of default from his creditors, stacks of his own company's real, disastrous financial statements, printouts of his and Jessica's maxed out credit card bills. And resting on top of it all, facing up so he couldn't miss it, was a single printed sheet of paper, the email he had sent to his wife, the one with the subject line, "It's working." A dead silence fell over the room. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, a sound I knew so well. David stared into the box, his face draining of all color. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Jessica, seeing his reaction, craned her neck to see. Her hand flew to her mouth, a little gasp escaping her lips. "What? What is this?" David whispered, his voice hoarse. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with dawning horror. I leaned forward, my hands clasped on the table. The kindly old fool was gone. My voice was quiet, cold, and carried the weight of 25 years of silence. "That," I said, "is the truth. It's a picture of the real life you've been living, not the fantasy you've been performing for me all weekend." I believe the term you used was bridge financing. It seems to me you're not looking for a bridge, David. You're looking for a lifeboat to save you from the ocean of debt you're drowning in. He just stared at me, speechless. "You must think I'm a complete fool," I continued, my voice rising slightly, each word a carefully aimed dart. "Did you really think I was that lonely, that desperate for a family, that I would just hand over millions of dollars without asking a single question? You invite me back into your life after 25 years of nothing. Not a call, not a card, not even a note when your own mother died. And you expect me to believe it's because you missed your old dad?" I looked at Jessica, whose face had crumpled into a mask of fear and shame. "And you! It's so wonderful to finally meet you. A performance worthy of an Oscar. You were going to deal with me later, weren't you? Once the money was in the bank, was I going to be shipped off to a fancy nursing home? Or would you just go back to ignoring me, hoping I'd die and leave you the rest?" Leo was looking back and forth between his parents and me, his young face a canvas of confusion and shock. He started to understand that the arguments he must have overheard, the hushed, frantic phone calls, were all culminating in this single awful moment. David finally found his voice, a pathetic mix of anger and desperation. "How could you? How could you do this? I'm your son. I made mistakes, yes, but I'm your family." "Family?" I spat the word out like it was poison. "You stopped being family when you stood on the other side of your mother's grave and refused to even look at me. You stopped being family when you used your own son, my grandson, as bait to lure me here. You didn't invite your father for Christmas, David. You invited a walking, talking ATM. And you know what? This ATM is officially closed." I stood up from the table, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "There is no investment. There is no $2 million. There is no Jensen Legacy Trust with your name in it." I let that hang in the air for a moment. I watched his last shred of hope die in his eyes. "But I did set up a trust," I said softly. "Last week, I put all $21 million into it. It's called the Sarah Jensen Foundation. Its mission will be to provide scholarships for nursing students and to support women's shelters here in Ohio. Your mother spent her life caring for people. The money will honor her memory, not fund your lies." David slumped in his chair as if his bones had turned to dust. It was over. He was ruined. "You see, David," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "You accused me of killing your mother all those years ago. And maybe you were right. I broke her heart, and I will live with that until the day I die. But you tried to sell her memory for a condominium complex. So you tell me, son, which one of us is the bigger monster?" I turned to leave, the untouched dessert on the table a testament to the bitterness of the evening. As I reached the doorway, Leo spoke for the first time, his voice small but clear. "Is it true?" he asked, looking at his father. "The email. Did you use me?" David couldn't answer. He just sat there, a broken man in his sham of a mansion, staring into a box filled with the wreckage of his life. And in that moment, I knew the karma wasn't just that he didn't get my money. The real karma, the hard karma, was that his own son was now looking at him with the exact same cold, disillusioned eyes that he had once turned on me. The cycle was complete. I walked out the front door and didn't look back. The screaming silence in my life was finally over. It had been replaced by the quiet, satisfying sound of a door clicking shut. The drive away from Northwood Hills was a journey through a foreign land. Every house I passed was ablaze with Christmas lights, cheerful Santas on the lawns, glowing reindeer on the roofs. They were beacons of a warmth and joy that felt a universe away from the cold, silent ruin I had just left behind. I didn't feel the triumphant surge of a victor. I didn't feel the satisfying heat of vengeance. I just felt hollowed out. It was the profound emptiness that follows a necessary amputation. You know you've cut away the sickness to survive, but you're left keenly aware of the part of you that is now missing forever. My son, the man he had become, was a cancer, and I had just performed the radical surgery myself. When I got back to my own small, quiet house, the contrast was staggering. Here there was no pretense. The furniture was old but paid for. The memories were real, both painful and sweet. I didn't turn on the television or the radio. I just sank into my old armchair, the one Sarah always said molded perfectly to my shape, and let the silence of the house envelop me. I had broken the 25-year screaming silence from my son, but I had replaced it with an eternal one. The door wasn't just closed. I had bricked it up from my side, ensuring it could never be opened again. There was a finality to it that was both terrifying and, in a strange way, liberating. The long vigil was over. I was no longer waiting for a call that would never come. The next few months were a strange sort of rebirth. I threw every ounce of my energy into establishing the Sarah Jensen Foundation. It became my reason for getting up in the morning. I met with lawyers not to discuss investments, but to draft bylaws for a charity. I interviewed board members looking for people with genuine compassion, not financial acumen. I found a small, unassuming office space above a bookstore downtown and furnished it myself. The simple act of assembling a desk, of feeling the solid wood and driving the screws home, felt more real and satisfying than anything I had done in years. It was work my hands understood. The foundation's first official act was to establish a nursing scholarship at the local community college. I insisted on being part of the selection committee. I sat and listened to the stories of young, hopeful women, many of them single mothers or working 2 jobs to get by, who wanted to dedicate their lives to caring for others. One young woman, a quiet but determined girl named Maria, reminded me so much of a young Sarah. She spoke of nursing not as a job, but as a calling to ease suffering. When we awarded her the first full scholarship, she broke down in tears, telling us it was the first time in her life anyone had ever truly believed in her. In that moment, watching her, I felt Sarah's presence in the room more strongly than I had in years. This was the legacy, not the cold millions in a bank account, but this tangible act of lifting someone up. This was how I would atone. News of David's fate trickled in through Richard Peterson, who would call me every few weeks with an update. Each report was another nail in the coffin of my son's life. The foreclosure on Willow Creek Estates was swift and merciless. The bankruptcy filing made the local business journal a small, humiliating article detailing his company's collapse. Peterson told me the gossip in Northwood Hills was vicious. The Jensens were a cautionary tale whispered about at the country club David could no longer afford. Then came the news of the house. I saw the listing online. The Grand Brick Colonial, a monument to his fragile ego, was described as a distress sale, the price slashed for a quick transaction. I saw the professional photos of the empty rooms, the sterile foyer where I'd first met my grandson, the polished dining room that had served as the stage for our final brutal act. It was all gone. The most painful news was about Jessica. She had filed for divorce immediately. Peterson's sources said the fight after I left was the stuff of legend, a torrent of accusations and recriminations that had shattered the last illusions of their perfect marriage. She took Leo and moved in with her sister 3 states away, determined to firewall her son and herself from the impending financial and social collapse. I couldn't find it in me to blame her. She was complicit, yes, but David's desperation had made him a liar to everyone, including his own wife. She was just another piece of wreckage in the storm he had created. David, I learned, had moved into a grim, 1-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, The kind of place with thin walls and a view of a parking lot. He had lost everything, becoming the solitary, forgotten man he had forced me to be. The symmetry was cruel, and it brought me no peace. Winter thawed into a cool, damp spring. The foundation was running smoothly. My life had found a new quiet rhythm. And then, on a Saturday afternoon, so ordinary I can't recall what I was doing just before, the phone rang. The number was from out of state, and I almost let it go to the machine. But something made me pick it up. "Hello?" A boy's voice, hesitant and cracking with the uncertainty of adolescence, came down the line. "Is this Grandpa Arthur?" My breath caught in my throat. It was Leo. "Leo? Yes, it's me," I said, my heart suddenly pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. "Is everything all right?" "Yeah, no, not really," he confessed, and I could hear the tangled knot of teenage pain in his voice. "We moved, me and Mom. We're living with my aunt now. It's different." "I'm sorry to hear that things have been so difficult, son," I said, and the words felt horribly inadequate. "It's okay," he said a little too quickly. "It's better, actually. Quieter." A long pause stretched between us, filled with all the things a 15-year-old boy couldn't articulate. "Listen," he finally continued, I needed to ask you something." "Anything, Leo." He took a shaky breath. That night, at Christmas, all that stuff in the box. My dad. Is that who he really is? The question was a clean shot, straight to the heart. It was the question of a child whose world had been upended, whose hero had been unmasked. He wasn't asking about money or business. He was asking about the fundamental character of his own father. The weight of my answer felt immense. I could either destroy the man completely in his son's eyes or lie. I chose to try for a third path, the truth, seasoned with a history he didn't know. "Your father," I began, my voice slow and measured, "is a man who got terribly lost a long time ago. He was a good kid, a great kid, but he saw me hurt his grandmother, your Grandma Sarah, in a way that he could never forgive. And that anger, it became like a poison in his heart. He spent his whole life trying to build a fortress around that anger, a fortress made of success and money to prove to me, and maybe to himself, that he was better than me. But the foundation of that fortress was cracked, and when it started to crumble, he got scared. And when people get that scared and that desperate, Leo, they do things they shouldn't. They hurt people. They forget who they are." I paused, letting him absorb the words. "That man you saw at Christmas, that was the desperate man. It's not the whole story of who he is. Deep down, I believe the little boy who loved to build model rockets is still in there. He's just buried under a lot of wreckage." Another long silence followed. I worried I had said too much, or not enough. Finally he spoke, his voice changing, shifting to safer ground. "The telescope you gave me," he said, a hint of life returning to his tone. "I set it up in the backyard here. Last night I saw the rings of Saturn. They were amazing, just like the pictures, but real." A true, unburdened smile spread across my face. "They are, aren't they? 1,000,000 miles of ice and rock, just hanging in the darkness. Puts our problems in perspective." "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, it does. Listen, I have to go. Mom's calling me. But maybe, could I call you again sometime? To talk about, stars and stuff?" The words were a lifeline. Hope, the stubborn weed I thought I had ripped out for good, pushed a single green shoot through the hard soil of my heart. He wasn't asking for anything. He was offering something. A connection. A chance to be just a grandfather. "Leo," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I no longer tried to hide. "You can call me anytime you want, to talk about stars or books or anything at all. The line is always open." When we hung up, the silence that returned to my house was different. It wasn't the silence of absence or exile. It was the quiet, peaceful silence of a field after a long, hard rain, waiting for something new to grow. The future was still a vast, unknown territory, but for the first time in a quarter of a century, a faint light had appeared on the horizon, a distant star. And it was more than enough. Karma is a funny thing. It's not always loud thunder and lightning. Sometimes it's a quiet click of a door shutting. Sometimes it's the silence on the other end of a phone. My son got what he deserved, but I didn't get what I expected. I didn't get joy from his ruin. The real reward wasn't the revenge. It was the second chance I never thought I'd have, a chance to connect with my grandson, based on truth, not transactions. It's a small start, a fragile beginning, but it's real. My story is a hard lesson that money can't fix a broken family, but greed can absolutely shatter one forever. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever felt the pain of a broken family bond or seen how money can change people, please give this video a like. It helps more people find this story. Share it with someone you think might need to hear it. And please, subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories. And in the comments below, tell me, do you believe in karma? I'd love to read your thoughts. Thank you for listening.